Since the introduction of the jury televote split in 2009, there have been 14 contests. In 6 of those contests, the winners were the mutual favorites of the public and the national juries. Alexander Rybak from Norway, Lena from Germany, Loreen from Sweden on her first win, Emily de Forest from Denmark, Conchita Wurst from Austria, and Salvador Sobral from Portugal. 4 winners secured their victories by being the televote frontrunners despite not being the first choice of the juries. Elle and Nikki from Azerbaijan, who were second, Netta from Israel, who was third, Måneskin from Italy, who were fourth, and Kalush Orchestra from Ukraine, who were fourth as well. There have also been 2 winners who managed to get the highest point total and win the show without being the first choice of either side of the voting system. Jamala from Ukraine, who was second with the juries and televote, and Duncan Lawrence from the Netherlands, who was third with the juries and second with the public. And so, how many times has the jury favorite been named the overall winner despite not coming first with the televote? Twice. Both times it was in favor of Sweden, in 2015 with Måns Zelmerlöw, and this year with Loreen's second win. Now, that might look like it's more than a coincidence given that it was the same country who was able to win the show that way, but the reality is that in a split system this is always going to be a possibility, and because the split is nearly 50-50 on both sides, it makes it all the more possible. If the argument is that the juries have been working against the choice of the public, the televote favorites have actually won 10 out of 14 contests. And even with the 2 compromise winners, where neither song came first with the public or juries, they were still more favored by the televote when we look at the point totals. But it's also important to mention that the way that this unfolded on TV was very different the first time the jury favorite won. In 2015, the jury and televote scores were combined and averaged to give a single set of points from each country. There was only one voting sequence done in the traditional way of calling each of the spokespeople to deliver the points. So at the time, there was no way of knowing where the points came from during the broadcast. It was only revealed after that Sweden was the third choice of the public, behind Russia in second and Italy in first. The following year, in 2016, the votes were split into 2 separate rankings, and that was a mostly welcome decision because it allowed for more transparency and it added an extra layer of excitement. But it didn't account for the kind of result that we had this year, where that drastic split unfolded in front of our eyes in such an extreme way. One of the most common fixes that gets talked about is reducing the power of the juries so that the televote has more say in the final outcome. Now, we refer to the current system as 50-50. With the introduction of the rest of the world vote, it's now 50.6 to 49.4. It just very slightly benefits the public. But what some people want to see is for the weight to shift to something like 75% for the televote and 25% for the jury. This is the ratio that's been used for the last 3 editions of UMK in Finland. They do it by taking the total jury points, multiplying it by 3, and applying the percentage of televotes to that number. The irony is that since this voting system was introduced, the juries have agreed with the televote as far as who should be the winner on every occasion. The difference is that for other songs that have done better with the jury than with the televote, they suffer a lot more, like Alexandra this year, who went from second to second last. Now, before the ratio was changed, it was a classic 50-50 split. And if we look at the last show that happened under that format, we see a very typical Eurovision story. In 2020, the jury's first choice to represent Finland was Looking Back by Axel Kankanranta. I did my best. The televote's first choice was Cicciolina by Erika Vikman. Without even explaining the songs further, you can see exactly what I mean, right? The juries went for something sentimental and serious, the televote went for something lighthearted and fun. Name a more iconic duo. Much like this year's Eurovision Grand Final, it came down to who was going to do better with the other system. Erika came third with the juries, and Axel came second with the public, making him the overall winner. Afterwards, there was the expected outrage because the fans didn't get what they wanted, and in the end, everybody lost to COVID anyway. Now that was under a 50-50 system. If it were 75 televote to 25 jury, we would see a different result. Right? Well, let's see. Total jury votes multiplied by 3, apply the percentage to get the new televote score, add it to the jury score, and Axel still wins, just with a smaller lead. Yeah, it turns out there was only a 1.5% difference between the televote scores for Axel and Erika. but that didn't stop people from calling it a robbery. And you have to think about what the reaction would be like if this kind of thing were to happen at Eurovision, where even after shifting the needle in favor of the public, the jury favorite would still win. Now, with Eurovision 2023, there was a big lead on both sides, so this kind of scenario wouldn't really apply. The public would have only needed 59% of the weight in order for Finland to be named the winner. But we know that now, after the fact. We wouldn't have known that before the votes came in. And if we're going to be looking at previous shows as guidelines for how to go forward, you might still find results that you don't agree with. A good example would be 2019. The public's first choice in that show was Norway, who got 291 points from the televote. The juries were much less impressed. They only gave them 40 points, which had them 18th in their ranking and then 6th overall. With such a big difference on both sides of the votes, 75 to 25 wouldn't have cut it. It would have had to been a whopping 87% in favor of the televote in order for Norway to have won. When the balance of power is so skewed, you can't really justify having juries anyway because their impact is so insignificant. And what would it be worth to a country like Czechia, who would go from 8th after the jury votes come in to 23rd? Well, this is where we get to the kind of show that some people want to see. No juries, all televote, the public decides everyone's fate. And what could go wrong? That's what the 2000s were. Yeah, turns out a lot could go wrong. Eurovision's image was already in decline for many years, and this was like a nosedive off a cliff. The switch to 100% televote clearly made the contest much more about spectacle than music. It isn't to say that there weren't well-written songs from that era with strong performances, but I think that most people would agree that there's a definite quality problem when you look at the overall selection.
No bailan en la escuela, no baila mi madre también.
While there are passionate fans who think of this as Eurovision's peak, there are just as many who don't, and I would have to imagine that the majority of people who work in music and television would side much more with the second group than with the first group. You need those people in order for Eurovision to have the presence that it has now. You need people to look at it as an opportunity for them, and it should be an opportunity for as many people as possible, not just for the artists that make bangers, girl bops, ethno bops, the kind of songs that we know the televote is going to eat up. The best thing about 50-50 is that the weaknesses on both sides are evened out. It's not going to produce your most ideal result or mine or any individual person's, but it always feels much more fair as a combined ranking than individually on either side. This video is part of a longer one where we take a big picture look at Eurovision's voting system and how it operates. We also dive into this year's jury votes to see what those scores actually reflected. And not to spoil too much of it, but the majority of jurors didn't actually choose Tattoo as the best song, but you can find more about that here. If you like this video, I hope that you subscribe so that we can keep chatting about the show as Malmo 2024 approaches. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.